Quantum Quandrix is pretty good right out of the box, but I believe that there are 10 cards that we can replace for under $20 to make this deck much more competitive. Let's take a look at Quantum Quandrix and the 10 cards that I would upgrade for this deck, and the video starts right now. Special thanks to our Patreon supporters who power our channel. Check out our Patreon for monthly giveaways, exclusive content, and even a starring role in our fan fight series. Link in the description below. Hello and welcome to the day. Thank you for spending your time with us. Welcome back to another episode of Jake and Joel Are Magic. I am Joel. We are going to upgrade the Precon deck Quantum Quandrix today. But before we do, if you would, go down there, hit that like button if you like the video by the end of it, and hit that dislike button if you don't. Make sure you stick around to the end after we take out 10 cards and replace them for under $20 to make it more competitive. We're going to look at 3 cards that are much more expensive but should be on your radar. Let's look at this deck. Quantum Quandrix is led by Adrix and Nev Twincasters, a blue, a green, and 2 other for a 2/2 Merfolk Wizard with Ward 2, which means whenever it becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, counter it unless they pay 2, and if 1 or more tokens would be created under your control, twice that many of those tokens are created instead. I want to lean into Adrix and Nev's ability. The deck in the box comes as sort of a go wide with some counter strategy, but also has a +1/+1 counter sub-theme that I just don't think belongs in this deck if we're going to have Adrix and Nev as our commander. So basically what we'll be doing with these upgrades is eliminating the +1/+1 counter strategy and leaning into the go wide token strategy. Along those lines, the first card that I want to cut is Crafty Cutpurse, a blue and 3 other for a 2/2 human pirate with flash. It says when it enters the battlefield, each token that would be created under an opponent's control this turn is created under your control instead. Now you may be going, Joel, we want to be doing the token strategy. I thought that's what we were going to be building here. It is, I just don't like this card at all. This is the kind of card that I personally don't like to build into my EDH decks, and so you're not really going to see me put it into my 3 ways to build or upgrades videos because you can't count on it. Every time an opponent creates a token, great. Crafty Cutpurse would be great to have in your hand. But there are going to be times when you're sitting there, this card is going to be in your hand and it's going to enter as a flashy 2/2 that takes, like, I don't know, maybe a few treasure tokens away from your opponent. It's just not very powerful for what we are paying to play it. So I want to run Asikas Chariot. It's not a super expensive card, only 50 cents. 1 green, 3 other for a 4/4 vehicle. It enters the battlefield. You create 2 2/2 green cat creature tokens, so you'll get double of those if Adrix is on the battlefield. And whenever it attacks, you get to create a token that's a copy of target token you control. So we are increasing our best tokens off attack triggers from Asikas Chariot. Only 50 cents, and for a 4-mana creature-ish permanent, this is what we want to be playing over Crafty Cutpurse. Let's guarantee that we're going to get what we need to hit our strategy square in the middle. Arashi the Sky Asunders, 2 green, 3 other for a 5/5 spirit. You can pay a green and X and tap it to have it deal X damage to target creature with flying, or while it's in your hand, you can pay 2 green and X, discard it, and it deals X damage to each creature with flying. This is fine, but it's just completely off of the synergies of this deck. For what it does a pretty good job of it. 5/5 for 5, that's also a good return, but I just want to lean into our strategy. This has nothing to do with our synergies. It's just a flying only removal spell, so we can do better than that. I want to take this out completely and just run Curious Herd in its place. A green and 3 other, instant speed, choose target opponent. You create X 3/3 green beast creature tokens, where X is the number of artifacts that player controls. So whenever you do get around to playing Curious Herd, just pick the opponent with the most artifacts on their side of the battlefield, and you get that many 3/3 green beast creature tokens. If there's an opponent with at least 2 artifacts, you're getting 6 power onto the battlefield for 4 mana, and that's not counting if Adrix and Nev are also on the battlefield. Curious Herd is also an instant speed spell, so we can do it at the end of our opponent's turn or in response to attackers. I'm a huge fan of this spell. You know that most of the time there's more than 2 artifacts on any opponent's battlefield, and this card being only 50 cents can really give you a lot of power. Next up is Forgotten Ancient, a green and 3 other for a 0/3 elemental. Whenever a player casts a spell, you can put a +1/+1 counter on it, and at the beginning of your upkeep, you can move any number of +1/+ +1 counters from it onto other creatures. I do like this, but again, it has to do with this +1/+1 counter. I want them to be growing wide. I want to be going really wide so that we can attack and punch through a lot. And so over Forgotten Ancient, I want to go ahead and run a Rasta of the Endless Web. 2 green, 2 other for a 3/5 reaching spider. Whenever an opponent casts an instant or sorcery spell, we create a 1/2 green spider creature token with reach. So it's sort of like Forgotten Ancient in that a thing is happening when our opponents are playing spells. Arguably, this card is probably worse than Forgotten Ancient in most just good stuff decks, but in this deck, having 2 created every single time an opponent casts an instant or sorcery, I think this would be a really good place for a Rasta of the Endless Web. It's only a 50-cent card, and you'll notice that that's 3 50-cent cards in a row for this $20 upgrade video, and that's because we've got some $5 hits coming up. Plaxcaster Frogling is 1 blue, 1 green, 1 other for a 0/0 frog mutant with graph 3, which means it enters with 3 +1/+1 counters on it, and you can move those off whenever another creature enters the battlefield. But you can also pay 2 and have target creature with a +1/+1 counter on it gain Shroud until end of turn. This cancels out targeted removal. Plaxcaster Frogling is absolutely a +1/+1 counter strategy all-star and just a great Simic card all around. However, like I said, I just want to lean everything into that token strategy and very much focus on Adrix and Nev doubling all of our tokens entering the battlefield. So I want to take Frogling out and I want to put in Avenger of Zendikar. We've put in some cheap cards. Now let's put in a card that is $5 right now and probably poised to go up in the future. 2 green, 5 other for a 5/5 elemental that when it enters the battlefield, you create a 0/1 for each land you control, and whenever you landfall, you get a +1/+1 counter on each of those plants. This card with Adrix and Nev on the battlefield is insane. You're creating a plant token for 2 times how many lands you control on the battlefield. That is the widest that you can go, the quickest as far as I know. Avenger of Zendikar absolutely belongs in this deck. $5 right now, and this is one of those I would say high thee to TCG player and pick up as soon as possible. I want to look at Cassetteochi Archmage next. 1 blue, 1 green, 1 other for a 2/2 snake wizard that has the ability to pay a green and a blue without tapping and give target creature the ability that it can't be blocked until end of turn. And if that creature's a snake, it gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Again, this is a very good Simic card. However, it very much leans on this +1/+1 counter strategy where you maybe want to be dumping all of your +1/+1 counters on one creature, making it huge, and then allowing it to swing through unblocked. So in lieu of Archmage, I want to take that out and I want to run Giant Adiphage. It's got age at the end of it, so I think that kind of fits a theme. 2 green, 5 other for a 7/7 trampling insect, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, create a token that's a copy of it. This is the kind of card that if you've got Adrix and Nev out and Giant Adiphage is on the battlefield and it starts swinging through, it can get out of hand if your opponents don't start answering Giant Adiphage. When you hit with Adiphage the first time, you create 2 copies of it and it just grows exponentially from there. Adiphage is only a 50-cent card, and so I think you should absolutely pick this up. Take out the Orochi Archmage, put it in another one of your Simic decks, and focus this deck in on this token strategy. Mana Gorger Hydra, 3 mana, 1 green, 2 other for a 1/1 trampling Hydra. Whenever a player casts a spell, put a +1/+1 counter on it. This is the exact kind of creature that you would want to be giving unblockable with your Orochi Archmage to. However, in this deck, we're focused on the token strategy, so I want to run Sylvan Offering. This is a little bit of politics built into your tokens, and again, Adrix and Nev on the battlefield, you're getting twice what this card promises. A green and X for a sorcery, choose an opponent. You and that player each create an XX green treefolk creature token. Then you choose an opponent. Can be the same one, can be a different one. You and that player each create X 1/1 green elf warrior creature tokens. So if you've got an archenemy at the table, let's just give all of the tokens to everyone else. You get a ton of tokens. You're getting double that if your Twincasters are on the battlefield, and you are blowing this game out. $2 for Sylvan Offering. I absolutely think that this card belongs in this deck. I love this card. Nissa's Expedition is 1 green, 4 other for a sorcery that convokes, so your creatures can tap to help you cast this spell. You search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. These 2 colors have good enough mana ramp that you don't have to run like 2nd or 3rd tier mana ramp like Nissa's Expedition in this deck necessarily. You've got mana rocks, you've got ramping growth, and all the staples. I would rather run a different 5 mana spell, and that is Tendershoot Dryad. 1 green, 4 other for a 2/2 with Ascend. which means if you have 10 or more permanents, it grants you the city's blessing for the rest of the game. At the beginning of each upkeep, that's yours and your opponent's, create a 1/1 green Saproling creature token. And if you have the city's blessing, Saproling tokens you control get +2/+2. This is a bomb card. Every single upkeep you're creating a 3/3 Saproling, it's not going to be difficult to get the city's blessing in EDH. This is a $5 card. This is one of the heavier hitters that I've put in here so that we can run some of those 50-cent upgrades, but we're going to want to run some of these $5 upgrades because token cards can get really powerful and the price reflects that. Swap out that ramp spell for a Tendershoot Dryad. I don't think you're ever going to hate seeing it. 1 blue, 1 green, 1 other for Golden Ratio, which is a sorcery that says draw a card for each different power among creatures you control. If you have got a 1/1, a 2/2, a 3/3, and a 4/4 on the battlefield for 3 mana, this is a good return, but I hate cards like this that you need something else working really well to have a card be good at all. This card might be a completely dead card in your hand. This is the same mana cost as Divination, which just says draw 2 cards, and for 3 mana you might not get to draw a card, or you might be drawing just 1 card. I just don't like the upside for the downside here, and so I want to take Golden Ratio out and put Urban Evolution in here. For 2 more mana, we're going to have a draw 3 cards, and we can play an additional land this turn. I definitely think for 50 cents, this is worth picking up to replace Golden Ratio so that that is never a dead card in your hand. Let me know down in the comments if you disagree with me on Golden Ratio. We had a debate about this in our Discord, which you can also join by clicking the link in the description below. I don't think it's a good card, but some people in my Discord did. Let me know what you think of it. From there, I want to take a look at the card Primal Empathy. 1 blue, 1 green, 1 other for an enchantment that says at the beginning of your upkeep, draw a card if you control a creature with the greatest power among creatures on the battlefield. Otherwise, put a +1/+1 counter on a creature you control. This is a good card, but again, it's just not great for our strategy. I want to be going wide, and I want to be putting a lot of +1/+1 counters on everything if that's the route we're going to go with +1/+1 counters. I don't want to be putting them on one thing at a time like an unblockable deck or like some kind of +1/+1 Voltron-y strategy. This just isn't what we want to be doing in this. So take Primal Empathy out, put it in another deck you've got, and just pick up a copy of End-Raze Forerunners. This card is 50 cents. This is a finisher. This is like a cheap Craterhoof Behemoth. 8 mana for a 7/7. Vigilance, Trample, Haste. When it ETBs, other creatures you control get +2/+2 and gain Vigilance and Trample until end of turn. This is how you win the game in a deck like this. Have a bunch of tokens, go super wide, get Adrix and Nev on the battlefield, cast your Avenger of Zendikar, next turn cast End-Raze Forerunners, profit. As for the 10th card that we want to replace in this, we're going to go with the Quandrix Campus. In all of these upgrade videos, I've always replaced the Campus just because I do not like this card. Enters the battlefield tapped. Both colors of mana, that's fine. Pay 4 to scry 1. I just don't think that this is a great land, especially when we could make a $4.50 investment into Alchemist's Refuge. That ability, 1 green, 1 blue to tap, and you can cast non-land cards as though they had flash this turn. That is so strong. EOT, have Adrix and Nev onto the battlefield. EOT, cast your Tendershoot Dryad. Anything, end of turn, or in response to something else. Alchemist Refuge is very, very worth running, and it's just a great Simic land card in general. So those are the upgrades that I would make. Let's look at 3 cards that are a little bit more expensive and should be on your radar, starting with Throne of the God Pharaoh. 2 mana for a legendary artifact. At the beginning of your end step, each opponent loses life equal to the number of tapped creatures you control. If you're going wide with a bunch of crazy tokens, you're attacking really strongly, and then all of your opponents are also getting drained for each of your tapped creatures, this card for just 2 mana is insane. It's $7, so it's a little bit more expensive than we would want for a $20 upgrade, but keep this one on your radar and pick it up when you can. The next one for $15, I would say, is Helm of the Host. Pick this one up as well. 4 mana for a legendary artifact. At the beginning of combat on your turn, create a token that's a copy of equipped creature, except the token isn't legendary. If equipped creature is legendary, that token gains haste, and it's got an equip of 5. I love Helm of the Host in this deck. I think it's absolutely busted and will just lead to some of the craziest interactions that you will ever have in a game of Commander. Like I said, $15, so make sure that this one's on your radar as well. And if you've already got a copy because you played during Dominaria, great. Immediately find a spot for this card in this deck. And lastly, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Parallel Lives. 1 green, 3 other for an enchantment. If an effect would put 1 or more tokens onto the battlefield under your control, it puts twice that many of those tokens onto the battlefield instead. That should look familiar because it's very similar, if not identical, to Adrix and Nev's ability. However, the difference between these two cards is that Parallel Lives is $49 if you find it for a really great price. It's probably even more expensive than that. So find yourself a copy of Parallel Lives whenever you can, pick it up, and put it into Adrix and Nev immediately. Those are the upgrades. Let's close the book. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know how you are upgrading this Quandrix Precon Commander deck. These pre-constructed decks are getting stronger and stronger every time they release new ones, and so it's getting harder and harder for me to cut bad cards from them because they're not really including bad cards, but we can make them more synergistic to our singular strategy if we give it a little effort. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button on your way out. Other than that, I'm tapped out, and I'll catch you later.